Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you the very basics of animation in Blender. I'm going to introduce the very basic terminology of animation, and I'm going to show you how to save your first animated clip. Without further ado, let's just jump into it quickly. If you're watching this video, I believe you already have the very basic understanding of Blender, and if not, I really encourage you to check out our Absolute Beginners course, which is linked in the video description. But yeah, let's now focus on animation. So, as you already know, every object in Blender has its position in the 3D space, and that position is a point within the X, Y, and Z axis. So what animation is, it's basically the motion in time from a certain point to another point. To express time in Blender, we are using the timeline down here. So here at the first frame, I need to tell Blender or record the position of this object. So to do that, I'm going to press the I key. And here we see the insert keyframe menu. So we can record many different things. Let's just focus on the location right now. So you can see the color changed here as well, and that indicates we have a keyframe, which is also visible here. With my right mouse button, I'm able to move the timeline. So let's go to the frame 100. Let's now move our object here, and let's press the I key again and record the location once again. So now you can see by those yellowy dots here we have the keyframes added for that selected object. If you'd want to play back your animation right now, you would have to move back to the frame 1 and press spacebar. So you can see the cube is moving, but as soon as the timeline reaches those keyframes here, it continues and our object is here without any further motion, and that's because we have 250 frames within our timeline. So we can shorten that just by typing 100 here and moving the timeline with my middle mouse button left or right. So right now when I press the spacebar, the animation will loop as soon as it reaches the end frame. So as you can see, in animation we are talking about frames and keyframes, but the movies you usually watch are expressed in seconds. So how do we combine these two together? And this is where the frames per second terminology comes in. You can see the FPS number of 24 being displayed here, and that means Blender plays this animation in 24 frames per second speed. That means the entire loop we have here is around 4 seconds, just a little bit more. But there are different FPS values you can use for movies. I would say for cinematic stuff it's usually 24 to 25. For YouTube and DSLR cameras it's around 30. And you can change that by going to the output settings here, and by the dimensions we have the frame rate down below here. So when I click, we can change it to, let's say, 60 frames per second. So you can see the animation is now much faster, but that means we will only have around one and a half second of the entire animation within 100 frames. So what if you want to keep your 4-second loop but expressed in 60 FPS? We need to change that and convert your current animation to 60 frames per second. To do that, we need to know the end value of the frames. So with 60 frames per second and 4-second animation, that's going to be 240, but our animation ends here. We can fix that by pressing the B key, selecting the keyframes within the timeline, and simply pressing the G key, and moving the frames to the end frame, which is also expressed here. You could see that. So let me do that again. Now when I'm gonna press my animation preview, you can see we have the same loop lasting 4 seconds, but it's in 60 FPS. Now you may also notice that the motion of our object is not constant, so it moves quite fast here in the middle range of the frames, but it slows down by the end and accelerates at the beginning. So what if you want to have the constant uniform motion? And to edit those kind of things, we need to introduce one more workspace you have available in Blender, and that is Graph Editor. So you can see the motion happening to our cube only applies to the y-axis. Let's go to the Graph Editor. I'm going to press Ctrl Spacebar, and let's see how this motion is expressed by those graphs. I'm able to edit the look of my Graph Editor by holding the Control key and pressing the middle mouse button just to have a better preview. So here you can see the line is pretty much uniform within the middle range of the frames, same as the motion of our object, and it gets flat here by the end, and it's also flat here at the beginning. So here at the bottom you can see this is the range of frames we have in our animation, and these are the value changes. So the green line represents the y-axis, and we can see the motion starts somewhere around value of 0 and ends around the value of 12, and it goes up pretty uniformly here, and again it flattens here. So that will indicate, you can see within those 50 frames here we have a very little of value changed, and here within this range the value changes more drastically, let's say. So yeah, this will, in the end, this will mean that the object slows down. So in order to prevent that, you could change the look of your graph here, for example. And if I select this point and this handle and press G key, I'm able to do something like this. So by manipulating those graphs, we are able to change the motion of our object. Right now you can see it simply moves forward without accelerating or deaccelerating. Let's see what happens if we manipulate the other graphs. So you can see we have also the red one and the blue one, and they represent the axis we have in the viewport. So let's move the red point downwards just a little bit. You can see when I do this, the cube moves left and right. If I do the same with my blue graph and move it upwards, you can see the cube moves upwards. So essentially this is the very basics you should understand about animation. So the motion is expressed by those graphs, it's recorded by the keyframes, and the animation length has to be expressed by the frames per second. I have created a simple scene to demonstrate how we can animate other properties of an object. So let me just grab and move the camera here. Let's rotate it slightly within the x-axis with the normals orientation, transformation orientation. So I'm moving it here right now, just a little bit back. And I think that's okay. Let's hit I key and save the location and rotation to the first keyframe. Now I'm gonna move to the last frame, move my camera somewhere here, for example, rotate it, see how the viewport looks like. Let's move it just a bit back. And yeah, let's add another keyframe. So you can see I'm using location and rotation, and our graph editor all of a sudden becomes a little bit more complicated, and that's because we are also able to change the rotation values here. Now if I play back the animation, my FPS settings are already set to 60 frames per second, so we have, with 300 frames, we have 5 seconds of an animation. And now, if I would like to disable the accelerating, deaccelerating effect, you see I have quite a lot of curves to play around with, but there is a shortcut for that, and when you press V within the graph editor, you can set the handle type for all of the graphs you have selected. So the type I'm using is vector, and you can see all of the lines become straight right away. So now when I leave the viewport and play back my animation, you can see we have this nice continuous motion. Now let's still try to add a little bit more life to our animation. Here, somewhere around the sequence, I'm not happy with how the frame looks like, so I can animate the camera length settings. Let me go back to the first frame. I'm gonna press the I key within the focal length settings. Now I'm gonna move the camera here, decrease it, to let's say 35. Yeah. I'm gonna press I again, and by the end of the animation I'm gonna set it back to 50 again. So let's do the playback and see how it looks like. Yeah, it's not perfect, but what I want to show you, you can animate many settings, not just the location, rotation and scale. To be honest with you, let me show you that. So let's say we have the cube selected. I'm gonna press I, set scaling keyframe here, and I'm gonna move to frame 200, for example, decrease the scale of a cube and set another keyframe. So you can see this is the effect we are having. Let's say at the end of an animation we will increase the scale of our cube by that. So you can play around pretty nicely with those very basic settings. Let's maybe scale the sphere as well, just a little bit so it goes like that. Sorry, let's go to the final frame. And by the way, the shortcut I just used to jump to the final frame was Shift right arrow. So Shift left arrow moves me to the beginning of an animation, Shift right arrow moves me to the end. Now, if you want to save your animation to a movie file, we go to the output settings here, move to the output, TMP, this is the directory where your file will be selected. You can change it by hitting this icon here, but let's go to the file format, choose the last movie format we have listed here. Now go to encoding. Here you can leave all the settings by default, but you might want to increase the quality to high and leave the codec as it is. Container, you can choose MPEG-4 or QuickTime depending what works better for you, but I usually use MPEG-4. The resolution settings are set up to 1080p by default, and to render an animation you simply go here and hit render animation or use the Ctrl F12 shortcut. So thank you girls and guys for watching. I really hope this video was informative, and if you liked it, would be great if you subscribe to this channel. I really want to make more content like this, and that really keeps me motivated. You can also check the Chocofur Store, which is linked in the video description, where we have over 1,500 Blender assets and over 200 of them are free. You may also consider donating to Blender Foundation, because thanks to amazing people like you, this amazing piece of software can become even better. Once again, thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.